Welcome, everybody, to America's Finest Sports. It's the start of the week. It's Monday. Tomorrow's the trade deadline in the MLB. So, all baseball fans are getting riled up, getting ready. Matt, host of Friar Talk, he's getting ready for tomorrow, hoping for Juan Soto. But of course, today we start off the day and we get a Josh Hader trade to the San Diego Padres. Now, normally Monday's shows is going to be football with Matt McCona, Eminem, whatever you guys want to call it. But whenever there's San Diego related news, our goal is to talk about that. And so we're going to start off today's show talking about the San Diego Padres. Big time deal for Josh Hader that, myself not being, fully in tune with every single thing going on with Padres, I wasn't thinking about Josh Hader to the Padres this weekend going into the trade deadline. But for people that don't know, the trade that happened earlier today, I think it was first reported by Jeff Passan, could have been somebody else, but he says the return on Josh Hader to Milwaukee is significant. The left-handed closer Taylor Rogers, lefty pitching prospect Robert Gasser, outfielder Esteury Ruiz, and right-hander Dinelson Lamet, sources tell ESPN. And he also brings up that Hader will be a free agent after the 2023 season. Now, Matt, you're the Padres guy. I got to hear, what is your, first reaction, first thought? Were you expecting this sort of deal? And because I know you called me. Right when it happened, you called me. You're like, man, I knew the thumbnail. And I was like, I can't. I'm sorry. But what were your thoughts going through your head immediately?
So my first thoughts were that it's just interesting that it's once again a guy that hasn't been linked to AJ Preller in a long time that gets traded, because we've heard all the stuff about Juan Soto, we've heard all the stuff about Wilson Contreras and a potential Cubs trade. So what's the first trade? Of course, a guy that AJ Preller's been looking at over the past couple seasons to potentially trade for, and then just didn't get it done. And then this time around, he gets it done. Now, he is buying Josh Hader a little bit low at the deadline, but this is actually something I'm really happy that AJ Preller is doing, because in the past, a lot of the criticisms of the way AJ Preller is traded, especially around the deadline, because if you look at more of his success, it's been more offseason driven. He's been a lot better when he trades in the offseason opposed for during the season trying to make a push. And for this deal, it was he's buying low on a guy that's been a top 5 or a top 10 reliever for the entirety of his career. So I think this is a big move for the Padres. I think this is a sweet move. I like the idea of adding improving your bullpen a lot, because the Padres bullpen has been really sus as of late. Taylor Rogers had struggled a lot, and while if you look at the course of the season, he's been pretty solid. I wouldn't say good, but he's been pretty solid. He's been abysmal as of late. So adding in Josh Hader, and I'll pull up his baseball savant here in a little bit, but his numbers are pretty on par with what he's looked like throughout his career. Now, if you look at his baseball savant, I'll show it in a second, but the big thing is not a lot of spin. That's always been the case throughout his career. So it's not like he's losing part of his game or anything like that, or he's washed up. But the Padres did give up significant prospect capital. I mean, they gave up Dinelson Lamet, which is more of a contract, moving a contract so they can save a little bit of money. But then they also gave up, Robert Gasser, goes by Bob Gasser sometimes. Dude throws absolute heat. Projects to be a pretty solid starter, a really good 3-starter, I'd say, if he does, reach his potential. And then, of course, Esteury Ruiz, who has completely come on in his own this year. Very, very fast outfielder. Sorry, there's a motorcycle going by. Very, very fast outfielder. And he is someone that was the Padres' 28th ranked prospect heading into the season, and then absolutely balled out, got the call up to the MLB this year. Didn't get many at-bats, so not a big enough sample size, but he literally worked his way from AA into the MLB because of how well he played. So he had over 1,000 OPS in the minors this season so far. Stole 60 bases or something ridiculous in almost the same number of games that he had played in. So really, really impressive stuff from Ruiz. Gasser, very, very solid prospect as well. So it's not like the Padres got Josh Hader for free, but it's an upgrade that makes a lot of sense, and they didn't have to move a CJ Abrams or a guy like that for him. One other thing I'll note before I go back to you, Makana, is he also has an extra year of control when compared to Rogers. So you get the extra year of control. He's going to be on your team the rest of this year and the rest of next year, whereas Rogers would have been a free agent after the season as well. So it's a swap with significant prospect capital added to it, and some players I liked a lot in Ruiz and Gasser, but I do think overall, I think it makes a lot of sense for this team.
Yeah, I really like the move, especially from the Padres standpoint, if you're looking at it from the let's try and compete. Because if you're trying to make a move and you're sending capital for a player like Josh Hader, who over the last 3, 4, 5 seasons has been arguably the best closer in baseball. And he's been part of a pitching cast in Milwaukee that is not to be messed with. Milwaukee may not have the best roster in baseball. Obviously, when it comes to hitting, they got Yelich, they've got, Hunter Renfroe. They've got some players. I'm not trying to sleep on them. But if you go up against them in the playoffs, because they're coming out of probably the worst division in the NL, you don't want to go against them because their pitching staff is ridiculous. You go out there and you're like, okay, well, what's game one? And you go up against Corbin Burns, arguably the best pitcher in baseball, especially with Jacob deGrom out. Obviously, there's Sandy Alcantara. There's other players, but Corbin Burns, one of the best pitchers in baseball. Brandon Woodruff, another one of the best pitchers in baseball. Like that right there is a 1-2 punch of starters that could easily lock up any lineup in the MLB. Then they get you through 6, 7, sometimes 8 innings, and you're like, okay, now we got to score. Maybe we're in a 1-2 run game. We got to get it done. Well, then you come up and you're like, all right, who's this guy next? And the long blonde hair comes out and you're like, this guy may be more difficult to hit against than Corbin, who's maybe the most difficult pitcher to hit, definitely in that division, but maybe in the MLB. So from as an Atlanta Braves fan, and we've gone up against the Milwaukee Brewers in the last couple of seasons in the playoffs, it's been something we're like, oh no, you don't want to go against Hader, even when Hader's struggling. When batters are struggling, I don't know. I feel like I'm more confident, we can strike him out. He hasn't been hitting the ball lately. When a pitcher is struggling, I'm still terrified. I don't care if Jacob deGrom in his last start gave up 6 hits. I don't care. I'm terrified. Oh wow, that one guy, yeah, he got one bomb let against him. I don't care. I'm not afraid of that. Josh Hader, his last couple of games, 3, 4, 5 games ago, he had some big outings against him, most particularly against the Giants. But he's a really good pitcher, and he's really going to help this team because of the inconsistencies as the closer. And I remember, Matt, seeing, I don't remember if it was in Discord or if it was watching probably one of your videos or just on Twitter, talking about whether or not the Padres should even go with a designated closer because of the inconsistency that Rogers has been bringing. Yeah, he's number 2 in saves in the MLB, but that's because the Padres every game are, they're within 1 or 2 runs because the offense just hasn't been there. So when I'm looking at from that standpoint, you have your guy that can go out there and lock them up almost every time. When you're trying to beat the Dodgers, that's needed. You got to be able to go out there and finish a game. So I think it's great from that perspective. The other aspect is the prospects that they gave up. While they did give up, significant capital, it wasn't the capital that we've been hearing about. It wasn't the names, like you said, not bringing up Abrams. It wasn't Abrams. It wasn't Gore. It wasn't these guys that some people bring up. I know that's not the main trade offers that I've been hearing in the Soto deal potentially, but you got rid of players, but you're keeping your biggest assets as your prospects. And so I think this is a great deal for them. I'm going to be really curious to see what happens tomorrow because they do still have their top prospects. And even if they don't get themselves a Juan Soto, there's other players out there that they can potentially go for. There's a center or not a center, a catcher out in Chicago by the name of Wilson Contreras, right? I know we don't want to get rid of Mr. Let's Go San Diego.
No, we don't like that move, but I know a lot of people do.
But there's just plenty of guys, Mr. Strikeout King, Joey Gallo. There's plenty of guys that they can potentially use those picks on, or those players, not picks. They can use those prospects on. They saved them and they still added an elite player because now when you're looking at the Padres roster, when you're going in to face them, seeing Josh Hader instead of Taylor Rogers is significant. When you're trying to strategize to beat the Padres, it will make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we start looking at this stuff. So I'm going to pull up Josh Hader's Baseball Savant just because, when you're talking about the moves and stuff, also other corresponding moves, I think you come from a good perspective of that. The Padres can make similar moves to the Braves if they don't get Soto, and they do have all those pieces still lose significant capital, like you were saying. But I want to share my screen real quick. I want to show you guys this Josh Hader Baseball Savant page because I think this shows a lot. So take a look real quick. In July, Josh Hader had a 12.5 ERA in 11 games and 9.1 innings pitched, right? Look at his other months. 0 ERA, 0 ERA, 3.3, and he hasn't pitched today. So it's August 1st. So he had 9 rough innings. Let's say probably not even all of them were that bad. He had 5 saves in that period. So he had probably 4 rough innings, right? For people saying that he's washed, we have 269 games where he's completed 125 saves in 316 innings with under a 1 WHIP and under a 2.5 ERA. So I'm done hearing that haters washed and stuff. I know if you come up here, these look bad. Oh my God, 1 percentile on barrel, 1% or 8 percentile on fastball spin. But check this out. Barrel was not the same, but the fastball spin was down, right? All right, let's go 2019. Barrel 1% again. Hard hit is still 9 percentile. Let's see what he looked like in 2019. Maybe not his best year, but 3.79. Like let's go back a couple years. It's pretty similar. The hard hit goes down, but the barrel still very low. Fastball spin still very low. So like the areas that like he's got worse in, he hasn't really changed. So he's only 28 years old. You have him for another year. You could potentially re-sign him after that. I just don't get the talk about Josh Hader being washed in this deal. I don't really think it makes much sense at all. So I'm pumped for this move, and I think one of the things we were kind of talking about, or you were talking about a little bit, is like more of like being uncomfortable as a Braves fan when you have to go out and play against Josh Hader. Well, as a Padre fan this year, and especially over the last couple months, we're like the feeling of the game is I feel really comfortable maybe the first 7 innings of a game, especially if you have a guy like Darvish, Musgrove. I mean, maybe not 7 innings, maybe like 5 innings of Snell as of late. But like Clevenger, he's been pitching really well, but not super long. But a lot of the stars have been really good, right? You feel really confident in the beginning part of that game. But when you get into the 8th and 9th inning as a Padre fan, it's been terrifying because you don't know what to expect. And so for me, going and adding a guy in Josh Hader is a great move, very under the radar move, not really talked about much. But I really like the move. I think it was really smart. I think you're giving up a decent amount, and like I think you might feel those prospects go. Like I think Ruiz or Gasser or both might end up being sweet players one day. But when you look back on this for where the Padres are at in the season and them trying to push to make a playoff run, I do think it makes sense. So I'm overall pretty happy with the move. But like you were saying with the remaining prospects they have, if they do want to keep pushing towards that, like the Braves did last year, you don't have to go and trade all your top end guys to go and hit this crazy home run. So we'll see where the Padres are at. The Soto stuff, I mean, we've talked about it a ton on our channel, but hard to tell right now. But the Padres are definitely still in it apparently. So that's kind of all I got on Josh Hader though.
Yeah, when I'm looking at Josh Hader and when I'm looking at pitchers in general, he's in the month of July. What's also in the month of July? The All-Star break, the big, the breakup in the MLB season. Pitching in baseball, and honestly just baseball in general, is very different from a lot of other sports because if you get traded in football, your skill set's going to be the exact same. Baseball is extremely, extremely based on the mental aspect of the game, and especially pitching, right? We hear about pitchers getting, the yips. They start being unable to throw. We hear about catchers getting the yips. They can't throw to second base. They can't throw to third base or first base, whatever it is. So in those types of situations, sometimes a change of scenery can be good. Now, sometimes a change of scenery can also be bad. But I'm not worried about his poor July because there are players in baseball that are streaky. There are, and we brought up the numbers from, early in this year. That was when he was hot and he had a 0 ERA through 2 months of baseball. There's a lot of streaky guys in the MLB and a lot of considered are arguably the best players in the MLB. Tatis, Acuna, these are 2 superstars that everyone says, oh, wow, they're just so good. Tatis has weeks where he's batting terribly and he's not hitting. But then the next week he'll come back, or the next month he'll come back and he'll hit 2 home runs in a game in critical spots and they'll win. It can be the same with pitching. You can get hot and cold, and that's all right because, one, he's not even playing for a team when he's cold. So they're going to get him. They're going to try to get him back on track. But they need him hot for October. They need him hot when he's going up against the Dodgers. When they're, because I think the Padres right now are in a good spot to make the playoffs. They'll probably be in the wild card game. They'll probably go against a difficult team to play in the wild card, whether it's the Mets or the Braves or, the Brewers. We don't really know, but they're now in a situation where if they can get him back on track, which they have a couple of months to do so, it's going to be really scary because I don't want to go up against Joe Musgrove, not get a hit, and then all of a sudden be like, all right, we got a chance in the ninth, and then Hader steps onto the mound because it's not going to go well for any team really. Like who would, if you're going and you're the Padres and you have three guys bottom of the ninth tie game against the LA Dodgers and you got Mookie, you got Freeman, and you got Trey Turner coming up. Do you want Taylor Rogers going up there or do you want Josh Hader? Who do you want? Who do you want to get through the side?
It's as easy as it gets. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's why I was so concerned with that. That was one of the areas I was really concerned. I thought they were going to add a right-handed reliever. I still think they might. But in terms of like where my concerns are at, I think like, yeah, you could maybe talk a little bit, not a little bit. You could talk a lot about the offensive struggles, but like in the way that they're losing right now, like they're usually losing from blowing leads. And they're not. The problem is they don't come back from wins. Like they score a couple runs and they have to bank on their starters and bullpen to get it done. So if you don't have a good closer, like it really starts like messing up your win totals. And that's what we've seen the last month or so. Like the Padres have not been as good. But also, if you throw in how many games that a guy in the bullpen or Taylor Rogers has blown the game, then you're like, okay, we could have like 10, 15 more wins in like the last, certain amount of period, probably like 10 wins, And so that goes a long way over the course of an MLB season. It would have been nice to have Hader at the beginning of the year. Maybe not for July though. Apparently,
maybe against the Diamondbacks.